Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Here are the stories we're following today.
We begin in our nation's capital. The Senate border deal that includes funding for Ukraine and Israel appears dead ahead of a key vote. Bloomberg's Amy Morris has the latest from Washington.
Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell says it's clear the deal won't become law.
It looks to me and to most of our members as if we have no real chance here to make a law.
That's because Speaker Mike Johnson says the bill would be dead on arrival in the House, claiming it doesn't go far enough to stop the flow of illegal immigration. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer slammed the GOP's about-face, accusing Republicans of cowering to Donald Trump.
Leader McConnell and the Republican conference did a 180-degree reversal. They were quaking at the knees at the fear of Donald Trump.
The first procedural vote is scheduled for later today. In Washington, Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Amy, thanks. Meanwhile, House Republicans have failed to impeach Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, and Bloomberg's Ed Baxter reports.
The vote is certainly an embarrassment for the GOP, which thought it had this wrapped up going in. The final vote was 214 in favor and 216 against. It was tied until one of the votes got changed in a procedural move so that the issue could be brought back for reconsideration. Now, some GOP members were not happy at all. Representative Ralph Norman said the leaders should have had the vote count going in, saying, "You don't put it on the floor without knowing." Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene saying those who voted against it will hear from voters. Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Radio.
Okay, Ed, thank you. In another setback for Speaker Mike Johnson, the House also failed to pass a standalone aid package for Israel. That $17.6 billion legislation required a two-thirds majority to pass. The vote there was 250 to 180. Today, Secretary of State Antony Blinken meets with Israeli leaders as Hamas signals it is open to a new ceasefire and hostage release deal in Gaza. Blinken expressed some optimism after meeting yesterday with the leaders of Qatar and Egypt.
We continue to believe that an agreement is possible and indeed essential.
Secretary of State Blinken's on his fifth trip to the Middle East since the Gaza war began. According to Al Arabiya television, Hamas wants a 135-day truce that could be rolled out in 3 stages. The second stage calls for Israel to pull all its forces from Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has insisted the war won't end until Hamas is destroyed.
Meanwhile, Nathan, in the race for presidency, Nikki Haley has suffered a loss in the largely symbolic Republican Nevada presidential primary, while President Joe Biden secured an easy victory in the state's Democratic vote. With more than half the vote counted, none of these candidates had more than 61% of the vote to Haley's 32.4%.
And Karen, changes could be coming at the Republican National Committee. Bloomberg News has learned Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel's in discussions with party leadership to step down by the end of this month. Sources say McDaniel's been facing pressure from Donald Trump.
Well, Nathan, turning to the markets and the economy, more Fed officials are dousing any hopes of a March rate cut. And here's Cleveland Fed President Loretta Mester.
It would be a mistake to move rates down too soon or too quickly without sufficient evidence that inflation was on a sustainable and timely path back to 2%. If the economy evolves as I expect, I think we will gain that confidence later this year, and then we can begin moving rates down.
Cleveland Fed President Loretta Mester remarks echo those from several policymakers, including Chair Jay Powell, who signaled they're comfortable taking their time cutting rates from a 2-decade high.
Let's turn to company news now, Karen. We're watching New York Community Bank Corp. That's after its credit grade was cut to junk at Moody's. Let's get the details now from Bloomberg's John Tucker. John.
And Nathan Moody says the bank is facing multifaceted financial risks and governance challenges. They've lowered the company's long-term issuer rating 2 notches below investment grade. Yeah, that's junk. The trouble began after it acquired assets of Signature Bank last year in the regional bank crisis that pushed NYCB into a different regulatory category where it had to beef up reserves. Now, just last week, NYCB announced plans to slash the dividend and warned of troubled loans tied to commercial real estate. The stock's down 59% year to date. This morning in the pre-market trading, it's down another 10%. John Tucker, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, John, thank you. New York community, not the only one taking it on the chin today. Snap shares are down about 30% this morning, make it 31% even. The owner of the Snapchat app posted disappointing revenue in the holiday quarter. It's a sign the company is still reeling from a slump in its digital advertising business. On the flip side, shares of Ford are up more than 6%. The automaker posted fourth quarter results above estimates and forecast higher profits in 2024.
Karen, we now turn to a transformative deal in the sports broadcasting industry. Walt Disney's ESPN, Fox, and Warner Brothers Discovery are joining forces to launch a sports-focused streaming service that'll feature major college and pro games that are usually seen only on traditional television. We get the details now from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
The service will be a third owned by each company. Pricing and a name have yet to be determined. According to a statement, they expect to launch the new service by the fall of this year. The aim is to draw in viewers who don't subscribe to a pay TV bundle and offer them all of the sports that come with such a package. It'll include Disney's ESPN and ABC networks, Fox and Warner channels, including TNT and TBS. In New York, Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Radio.
It's time now for a look at some of the other stories making news around the world. And for that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Amy Morris. Amy, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. President Biden will attend 3 fundraisers hosted by New York doctors and financiers as he looks to extend his cash advantage over Republican rival Donald Trump. The fundraisers, which will largely be held during the afternoon but could bleed into rush hour traffic, come after the president's re-election campaign raised $97 million in the fourth quarter of 2023 and reported $117 million on hand. The president has attended a series of high-dollar fundraisers recently, including a trip last week to Miami and Palm Beach. The Biden campaign hopes a cash edge can help the president overcome polls that show him consistently trailing Donald Trump, who is now closing in on the Republican nomination. Areas of Southern California are trying to dry out after an extreme weather system pummeled the region with heavy rain and strong winds. Los Angeles Fire Chief Kristen Crowley.
The road to recovery may be long, and it requires an all-hands-on-deck approach. Damage assessments have started, and all city departments will continue to coordinate and support our recovery efforts.
Chief Crowley says there is still danger from falling trees and mudslides, but the recovery has begun slowly as power is being restored, and there is more rain in the forecast for today. While it's not expected to be heavy rain, it does increase the risk of more mudslides. An alarming trend on the nation's highways. More roadside assistance workers are being killed. A study by AAA finds 123 such workers were killed by passing vehicles between 2015 and 2021. Study author Brian Teft.
While they do what they do to make sure we can all make it home to our family safely, sometimes they don't make it home. So this research is all about understanding the risks that they face and figuring out what we can do to better protect them.
The study finds 84% of the crashes involving roadside assistance worker fatalities were in good weather conditions, no wet or slippery roads. Switching up arms for multi-dose vaccines could improve immune response by up to 4 times. That's according to new research out of Oregon Health and Science University, which looked at how people received COVID-19 vaccine shots. Researchers say it could have implications for other types of vaccines as well. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris, and this is Bloomberg, Karen.
All right, Amy, thank you. Well, we bring you news throughout the day right here on Bloomberg Radio. But now you can get the latest news on demand whenever you want it. Just subscribe to Bloomberg News Now to get the latest headlines at the click of a button. Get informed on your schedule. You can listen and subscribe to Bloomberg News Now on the Bloomberg Business app, Bloomberg.com, plus Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Time for the Bloomberg Sports Update with John Stashower. John.
Karen, the Edmonton Oilers have not lost a game since December 19th. Their 16-game winning streak came to an end, losing 3-1 at Vegas. They fall just short of tying the NHL's all-time record. Still belongs to the Pittsburgh Penguins, who won 17 in a row in 1993. Bruins lost at home to Calgary 4-1, and the Capitals lost at home to Montreal 5-2. Kyrie Irving back in Brooklyn, spent 3.5 years with the Nets. A lot of controversies there. Didn't get vaccinated, tweeted a link to an anti-Semitic film, forced a trade to Dallas. He scored 36 points for the Mavs. They beat the Nets 119-107. Luka Doncic had 35 points, 18 rebounds, and 9 assists. Couple of changes for the All-Star rosters as Joel Embiid and Julius Randle are both injured and can't play, so they'll be replaced by Trae Young and Scotty Barnes. Clayton Kershaw will return to the Dodgers for a 17th season at the age of 35. He had a great 2023 in the regular season and then got lit up in his one postseason start, gave up 6 runs and only got 1 out. Kershaw is coming off shoulder surgery. He likely won't pitch until July. College hoops, UConn's #1, improving to 21-2, 11-1 in the Big East. Huskies beat Butler 71-62. The upset was in the ACC. Clemson was up by 16, held on to beat North Carolina 80-76. The Tigers are now 2-51 in their history, playing at Chapel Hill. John Stashauer, Bloomberg Sports.
From coast to coast, from New York to San Francisco, Boston to Washington, D.C., nationwide on SiriusXM, the Bloomberg Business app, and Bloomberg.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager. Divided government is nothing new in Washington, D.C., but this morning there are even more cracks on multiple fronts. A bipartisan deal on Ukraine aid and border security looks all but dead in the Senate. A bid to impeach Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas has gone down in a surprise defeat in the House. And in the presidential race, Nikki Haley has taken an embarrassing loss in the largely symbolic Republican primary in Nevada. Lots to discuss in politics. Let's do it now with Greg Valliere, Chief U.S. Policy Strategist at AGF Investments. Greg, good morning. Saw your note this week that Congress has hit rock bottom when the border security Ukraine deal looked on the brink in the Senate. Do you have a new support level for U.S. politics this morning?
Good morning, Nathan. No, it's pretty difficult to get much lower than they are right now. It's an embarrassment. They're dysfunctional. And sadly, I don't see a lot of improvement as we head to the next crisis, which is end of February, early March, on getting a budget.
Before we get to that point, I mean, we do get closer to that government shutdown deadline, but what is going on when it comes to the paralysis we saw in this bipartisan deal? We heard President Biden yesterday calling on Republicans to show some spine against former President Trump. Is this all about his influence on the GOP?
I think two things, Nathan. First of all, the new Speaker of the House, who's a rookie, who's feeling his way around Capitol Hill, Mike Johnson, is trying to assert himself, and it's not easy. The bigger story, in my opinion, involves Donald Trump, who is calling the shots. Incredibly, 8 or 9 months before the election, Trump is calling the shots. You've got a weakened Senate Majority Leader in Mitch McConnell, and you've got Mike Johnson, and neither of them are capable of getting a deal, so Trump is in the picture.
With Trump in the picture, let's talk about this government shutdown deadline. Does that raise the risk that we could see a shutdown if the former president does continue to assert his influence on Capitol Hill?
Yeah, there's a risk if he, comes out and asserts that we must have a shutdown. That would influence a lot of people. I still think, though, the more likely outcome is once again kick the can down the road, and have another extension well into the spring. There are many people in the House who wouldn't mind having just one extension after another through the fiscal year, which ends on September 30.
What does this impasse on border security and Ukraine aid mean politically for President Biden? We've seen swing state polling from Bloomberg News and Morning Consult that shows that the immigration issue is a vulnerability for the president. With this deal not getting through, what does that mean for the president politically?
Nothing good, and it certainly makes our allies around the world nervous. Vladimir Putin has said for quite some time that the U.S. is not a dependable ally. Well, we're seeing now that maybe we are not a dependable ally, and that doesn't help Joe Biden.
And when it comes to the assertion of House Speaker Mike Johnson's influence, we saw more evidence of just how difficult that's been with this surprise defeat for the impeachment articles he's been pushing against Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. How surprised were you by that going down in defeat last night?
Not terribly so. I thought a few Republicans would waver and vote against. But I tell you, Nathan, this new Speaker, Johnson, is on thin ice. If he can't get a budget deal, if he decides he's got to go with some Democrats to get a deal done, I think the right wing in the House could give him the boot.
How likely do you think that is when we've seen multiple we had former Speaker Kevin McCarthy last not that long, but do the Republicans really want to go through another speakership fight with so much difficulty getting any policy done in Washington?
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. It makes no logical sense. But, since when did logical sense dominate Washington? It's been a very dysfunctional period, and sadly, I don't see the dysfunction ending anytime soon.
In our last 30 seconds here, Greg, let's talk about the presidential race as well. The symbolic defeat for Nikki Haley in Nevada. Is it just symbolic, or does it have implications for her going into South Carolina later this month?
Pretty much symbolic, but it's not a good headline for her today. And she's not going to win in South Carolina, in my opinion. She's got until Super Tuesday, March 5th. If she wins a primary or 2 or 3 on March 5th, she's back in the picture. But I'm not sure she's going to win any primaries then. And once those primaries are over, I think Trump becomes the presumptive nominee by mid-March.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Today, your morning brief on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed at 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, and Bloomberg 960 in San Francisco.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, SiriusXM, the iHeartRadio app, and on Bloomberg.com. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.